This isn't about civil disobedience. It's about people expressing their concern about the problem of global warming.
That's Dan Becker from the Safe Climate campaign in Washington. He's set to join a major rally on Sunday in D.C. to protest the Keystone XL pipeline. They're expecting 20 to 30,000 protesters. And just 2 days before that protest, the federal government released a new report on sustainable development. That report out today shows improvements in several areas, include reducing key pollutants, restoring Great Lakes, increasing Canada's protected areas, and greening of government operations. Can this report dampen the criticism on Canada from south of the border this weekend? Joining me in studio, Michelle Rempel, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment. In Halifax is NDP environment critic Megan Leslie. And in Kingston, Liberal Natural Resources critic Ted Hsu. Thanks for joining me today. Appreciate your time, everyone.
Thanks.
Ms. Rempel, I'm going to start with you. The government released its sustainable development strategy and announced millions of dollars for funding a green resources projects today. Is this an attempt to put a greener face on government resource development portfolio ahead of the mass anti-Keystone pipeline protest plan to take place in Washington this Sunday?
Well, Hannah, I think that this is a continuation of the work that we've been doing with our message to show Canadians that while we recognize that natural resource development and the energy sector is an important part of our country's economy, a very important part of our country's economy, we also understand that Canadians expect a high level of environmental rigor, both in the assessment process, through the build-out of major projects, as well as on the monitoring end. Across a wide variety of policy areas, including greenhouse gas emissions. I've talked a lot in the House this week and in previous interviews with you about how our government over the years have put in place a rigorous sector-by-sector regulatory approach to monitor greenhouse gas emissions, to bring them down, and we're starting to see results there. But we're also seeing our economy grow, and it's that balance that our government's trying to take.
And what do you think of these big demonstrations that are taking place on Sunday?
Well, people have the right to express how they feel, but our government is, again, within the scope that we're responsible for, trying to show that our natural resource sector, our energy sector, is being developed with environmental stewardship in mind. I could cite numerous examples of that, but that's really the balance that we're trying to show, is that, this isn't about, good versus evil. This is about how can we create jobs, how can we ensure that there is economic growth, but also ensure that the environment is protected, and we feel that we've got that right.
You would say no need for these protests then?
Well, I don't think that, I'm one to tell anybody what they can or can't do with their time, but what I am here to say is that we do feel like we've got the right balance struck through our responsible resource development package.
Megan Leslie, I want to come to you. If the Keystone pipeline proposal is rejected and First Nations and the government in BC are opposed to the Northern Gateway pipeline, where can Canada send its oil sands bitumen?
That's a great question. How about looking at our own energy security needs first? We have unmet refining capacity in Canada right now. There are refineries closing down, in fact. We could look at building upgraders here in Canada. We could look at some kind of mechanism, perhaps a west-east pipeline, to make sure that folks who are living in the east actually can use Canadian product instead of product that's shipped halfway around the world. There's no strategy here from the Conservatives for any kind of energy security for us, job creation for us here in Canada. I mean, Keystone XL, let's be honest, that's going to create jobs, but not here in the U.S.
Ted Hsu, I want to bring you in here. After all, the oil sands has become a key driver of the Canadian economy. So how do you respond to that?
The decision by John Kerry and Barack Obama about the Keystone pipeline is going to have an enormous effect on the Canadian economy, on the economy of our whole country. And the fact that Canada has been a laggard on climate change, that Canada has a reputation of being obstructionist. That's why it got all those fossil awards at international conferences. That's coming back to affect the Canadian economy. Our poor environmental policy on climate change is going to affect the Canadian economy. That's what Canadians need to know.
Michelle Rempel, I want to bring you in here. Would the government agree to a North American carbon tax in exchange for the U.S. government approving the Keystone XL pipeline?
Well, first of all, our country is different from the U.S. in a lot of ways. But we have committed to ensure that we've got standardization of regulations in certain areas, including our light vehicle emissions, which we announced earlier this year.
But what about a North American carbon tax?
Well,
in
again,
exchange?
we're looking at our Made in Canada plan, which includes things like regulating the coal-fired electricity sector, which is something that we're actually ahead of the Americans on. And I think anybody on this panel would agree with you that the coal-fired electricity sector is a large source of greenhouse gas emissions across the world, and we've actually been an international leader in these regulations.
Well,
so this is what we're focusing on. And just to some of the comments, made about whether or not where our energy should go, where our energy projects should go. I really find that the market determines this, right? You look at market needs and market valuations, and anybody that you talk to will say that our energy products need markets beyond the U.S. They need markets beyond Canada. So we should be looking at energy infrastructure holistically, and I just don't see that from my opposition colleagues.
But no thought on a North American carbon tax.
Again, our government has our sector-by-sector regulatory approach, which
can't
is
even say the
showing
words.
No, it is. It's like, Hannah, the point is that it is showing a reduction while our economy grows. And for all of this talk about a carbon tax, which will increase the price of goods, we've actually seen progress here in Canada, and that's the bottom line.
Ted Hsu, I see both of you guys shaking your head. Ted, I'll bring you in first.
Well, this sector by sector, as the Conservative government calls it, that approach is slow. There's many sectors that haven't even started yet, and it's costly. We know that the heavy hand of government versus having the market on your side, that heavy regulatory approach is expensive, and it's not even something that anybody worthy of being called conservative should be considering. The Conservatives here, let me give a clue to Michelle Rempel. And I'll give a clue to Michelle Rempel by quoting Stephen Harper, who said that the polluter pay principle is at the heart of our environmental philosophy. That's a quote from Stephen Harper, and Michelle Rempel should think about that.
I said the same thing in the House because
you said the same.
We have told industry
that's
how
right.
to regulate.
In fact, both ministers, natural resources and environment, and the parliamentary secretaries and the Prime Minister all said that. So think about that.
We have.
Okay, let me just bring something else in here. I want to show you a little more of what CBC's Margot McDermott found when she went to Maine last week to look into stories of Canadian consular officials attending town council meetings in small New England towns to dissuade them from banning oil sands bitumen from running through pipelines in their region. Listen to what Canadian diplomat Aaron Abelman said in the town of Raymond, Maine.
Oil sands crude has been safely transported by pipeline for over 30 years. Recently cited allegations that diluted bitumen, or dilbit, from Canada's oil sands is more corrosive in pipelines are false.
Now, why are Canadian consular officials traveling around to town council meetings defending the oil sands industry? Michelle, I want to start with you, Rempel.
Well, I think, the question becomes why my opposition colleagues are traveling down to Washington to...
Oh, come on.
Megan, I've got to bring it up, right?
Let's answer the question first. So why are
question,
Canadian consular officials doing this rather than focusing on Megan? Then we can go to that.
I don't think anyone here would disagree with the fact that the energy sector in our country is a huge, important part of our economy. It creates hundreds of thousands of jobs. It creates billions of dollars of revenue, not just for the GDP, but for government coffers to run our social programs off. So the question becomes, can we find export markets for it so that we're not a price taker? Yes. And can we develop that resource in an environmentally sustainable way? Yes, we can. And our government, is proud of the fact that we're taking a stance that says exactly that.
Megan, Leslie, what are your thoughts on this?
It's unbelievable what's happening here. The government is sending lobbyists to town council meetings to try and persuade people about Keystone. I know, I can guarantee they're going to be sending tons of folks down to lobby about either a cap and trade or a carbon tax, price on carbon that Obama was talking about. And the Conservatives are caught right now. They're hapless. They're just like, wait, what can we do? Here's a shiny object. Today they announced, well, here's a report showing emissions trends and they're going down. Well, first of all, that had nothing to do with climate change. It had everything to do with particulate matter. Second of all, it was actually because of provincial regulations. And thirdly, it was from 2 years ago. I mean, it's laughable. They're trying to distract us by saying we've got all this other stuff going on. They will not answer your question, Hannah, about what will happen if Obama actually does this, what he's saying, and puts a price on carbon. They won't answer that question.
Okay, Ted Hsu, I only have a few seconds left. What is your response to this, that they're sending consular officials to these towns?
Canada's international reputation on climate change is so bad. That's why we have to send consular officials to little town council meetings. The effect on Canada's economy will be the responsibility of Stephen Harper's government.
And Michelle Rempel, I'm just going to give you the last word here. You got a couple of seconds.
Sure. I mean, I just find that this debate has become so politicized and so false. I mean, for Ted to say those sorts of things when under his government's tenure, our greenhouse gas emissions rose by 30%, and we've started to see a stabilization under our government's tenure.
Thanks
this is a
to the
record
recession.
we should. Our economy grew, Megan. Our economy grew while this happened. We're one
Thanks
of
to
the
the
few
recession in the
G7 countries that actually saw growth and greenhouse gas emission stabilization. This is a record we're proud of.
Okay, we're right out of time. Michelle Rempel, thank you for joining
Thanks,
us.
Anna.
Megan, Leslie, and Ted Hsu,
Thanks.
thanks for this discussion.